Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to PreVeil's award-winning Compliance Corner.
What awards have we won?
I don't know if we
I
won.
don't think we've won any awards.
All right. In our own eyes, we're great.
Yes, we've won our own personal awards that we gave ourselves.
That's
which
right.
is kind of what we're going to be talking about today a little bit.
A little bit. But hopefully we don't do too much self-congratulation. Hey, you didn't introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. I'm Noelle Vestal.
Because, I can't forget you. I know who you are. I just want to make sure everyone
I want to make sure everybody else knows who I am too. That's just only polite. I appreciate it, Orly.
All right. So today's topic is going to be a follow-up on our webinar from last week on our DoD webinar. Just to let you know, last week we were very fortunate. We had Stacy Bostjanick, who's the head of the CMMC program, and Dave McKeown, who's the CISO over at the DoD. We had them on a webinar led by our co-founder Sanjeev. Over 2,500 people signed up. So, good numbers, good attendance, and it was a great event in which they kind of gave the straight message to a lot of people on what people's requirements were for the new CMMC, what the updates to the timeline were, and what people need to be doing today to be ready for CMMC. So there was a big question and answer part at the end of it. And what we're going to do today is just go over some of the key points that Dave and Stacy made and just give a little bit of commentary on them, because we think if, maybe they weren't as clear on some of the points, or if even if they made the point clear, there's always a lot of follow-up. So we took 3 points that we thought were really important that were made, and we're going to discuss them today. Maybe if we'll do a follow-up webinar, a follow-up video, follow-up compliance corner to this one, in which we discuss more. But we're going to start off with what we thought were some of the most important ones, starting with number 1. And that's where Stacy said that only a small number of contractors will ever be able to rely alone on self-assessment. Why don't we go to the clip first?
Now, one of the things that we've been a lot of discussion about this bifurcation of level 2 out in the media. And truthfully, our analysis has shown that there will be a small number of companies that might be able to just only ever do a self-assessment. Because of the fact that most companies participate on more than one contract, it's expected that it only takes one contract with a higher level requirement to drive that need for an assessment. So our expectation is the number of companies that will only ever have to do a self-assessment is going to be very small.
All right. So in that clip, Noelle, Stacy said, that there will be some, in theory, self-assessment on level 2, but people shouldn't count on that. What do you say to that?
I think that's incredibly wise, and I'm really glad that she came out and sort of said that in a public forum, because that's something that we sort of in the compliance world have been kind of driving into people's heads from day one, that you can't just assume that whatever your self-assessment is all you're ever going to have to do. There's got to be somebody. I mean, that's kind of like saying, okay, well, I'm going to school every day and the teacher gives me an assignment, but I just grade all my own work and she never looks at any of it.
Right.
That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And also, are you really going to learn anything like that? Probably not. So,
right.
So I'm really glad that she went ahead and made that statement sort of publicly, where everybody, hey, listen, you're probably going to have somebody come in and assess you. And like she said, it's not going to be everybody, but it's going to be probably a pretty substantial number of people, because I mean, we're all dealing with CUI in these scenarios, and that's unclassified information, but it's controlled unclassified. That's stuff that could conceivably have an actual really negative effect on, national security. So we should all be taking it seriously. And part of that is getting somebody to come in and make sure that you're actually doing what you say you're doing.
Right. And the point that kind of stuck with me is that even if you are one of those people who doesn't need a self-assessment on that contract, and this is what you were saying just a moment ago, most defense contractors, and she said this, have more than one contract.
Yeah.
So just because on that one little contract you don't need an outside assessment, probably a lot of those other ones will. So
all it takes is one.
Right. You're living on borrowed time if you think that self-assessment, you're going to be able to live in self-assessment.
And also another thing to think about too is that it really all it takes is one. So if you're in a situation where you haven't done that level 2 assessment, you're kind of cutting your feet off a little bit, right? Like, because you're not giving yourself the opportunity to go after those contracts that do require level two assessment. So you could be conceivably, sort of scoping down your possibilities with working with the DoD, which, isn't really it. I mean, everybody has to make their own decisions based on their own business processes and their business focus and goals. But really, it makes a lot of business sense to put yourself through this rigor to then have the box checked, and then you can go after, any DoD contract really that you're applicable for.
Yeah. And so summary statement here is you're not going to be able to rely just on self-assessment loans. All right.
No.
All right. You heard it from the Oracle at PreVeil.
With my crystal ball.
Yes. Okay. Let's go and attack another one real quickly. Now, this one struck me as interesting because I had heard gossip around, I shouldn't say gossip, but I've heard discussion around this, and that this was the first time I really heard it kind of truth to power type thing stated in a public forum, that companies that are doing their self-assessments are being way too easy on them, but that lack of truth has consequences. I was trying to make a pun there. Never mind. Let's just take a quick moment and go the clip.
In the lower left-hand quadrant is the DIB cybersecurity requirements and assessment mechanisms. And as I said early on, there was a requirement for 800-171. All you had to do was run the checklist yourself and report that in SPRS. Later on, we added in the DIB-CAC high assessments, where DIB-CAC would come in externally and perform an assessment and see if that lined up with what was being reported in SPRS. I'll tell you that over time, I think they've done about 150 of these since they stood up, and the numbers haven't been great as to the self-assessments versus what DIB-CAC was assessing. I think people were being generous on their own self-assessments, and the DIB-CAC took a harder approach, and so we're working on that.
All right, Noelle. So what do you say to that? Like,
again,
surprised first of all.
No, could not be happier that she said this. Again, I think many of us in compliance were going, yay, finally. Because again, this is something
that one-handed applause, because I couldn't really hear that.
Sorry. There you go. But definitely, I think a lot of us were really excited about that because of the fact that so many RPOs, C3PAOs, RPs have gone out there saying over and over and over again, yes, do your self-assessment. You have to put that in SPRS. Be honest about it. Make sure you're really honest. Make sure you're not, sort of sugarcoating a little bit here and there, going, well, we kind of have this done, so that counts. There's a lot of, it's just human nature for all of us. Well, most of the time to think, we know better than somebody else, or like, I made this, so it's going to be great.
Right.
That's not the case.
Little fact, there's a psychological phenomenon called the IKEA effect. Read Dan Ariely.
Oh,
about that.
Interesting. Anyway. IKEA effect. I do love IKEA though. But yeah, so it's this whole idea of like, since I did it myself, it's got to be just amazing, right? And it's going to be great. Or moreover, there could be even the secondary part where you're like, well, yeah, but like, I know what I have planned. So it's basically like it's done. That doesn't work.
That doesn't translate.
Doesn't translate. You can't just assume like, hey, well, I'll have this done at some point in the future, whatever time that is. So I'm going to count this as fully implemented or whatever. You have to be incredibly brutally honest with yourself. And I know that I'm not the only person in compliance who has said this. I've heard it from others for sure. You have to be brutally, brutally honest about that self-assessment. And I think that if you can't do that, if for some reason you just don't think that you're going to be able to do that, have somebody come in, have an RPO come in and just do a quick, like, hey, tell me where I'm at right now. Give me the assessment as it stands right this minute.
Right.
So no implementation of anything else, no touching anything else. Just where are we at? And get that honest feedback, because having somebody else come in and sort of assess you, that's literally the whole point of CMMC. The reason why CMMC exists is because, I mean, we've had these standards in place since 2017 and people were not doing them because they were self-assessing that they were doing these things. And now all these people are coming out of the woodwork going, oh my gosh, people are going to come in and look at what I'm doing. Well, I didn't know that I was supposed to be doing this. Well, you kind of have. my bad. But now that somebody's actually looking at it and paying attention, and this isn't on the dib, honestly, it's really not. I mean, it's one of those situations where, again, it's human nature. If somebody told me, hey, all I have to do is just sign by the dotted line that I did these things, it's like, well, there's not a whole lot of people, unfortunately, out there who are going to go, you know what, let me do the rigor of all of these 110 controls,
Right.
make sure they're all done correctly, get myself, third party assessed to make sure everything's fine. And then I'll sign by the dotted line when you know that no one was going to come and check on you. Well, now people are coming and knocking on your door and checking on you. And that's why a lot of people are getting scared and freaking out. But a lax self-assessment is not going to do you any favors. It's really not. I know a lot of people will do it thinking, oh, well, it's like that sort of optimistic kind of viewpoint of like, oh, well, I'll have this in place. And I don't want to have it too low because somebody will get mad at me. It's way, way better to be super, super honest in the beginning, because think about it. If nothing else, it means when you do get all that stuff done, you're going to look that much better. Like, oh, look at all this great stuff that I got done. I was at a negative 203 and now I'm at a positive 110. Oh my gosh, it's great. So yeah, definitely do not fall into that trap.
All right. And let's take a third and final one. This one, what kind of surprised me as well. The question that Sanjeev asked is, in addition to, sorry, let me try and be a little bit more accurate. Will assessments, CMMC assessments, look not just at NIST 800-171 compliance, but also look at the organization's compliance with DFARS 7012 C through G? So let's just go to the clip real quickly and see what Stacy said here.
Could you comment on how DFARS 7012, particularly C through G, incident reporting requirements, will be a part of a CMMC assessment? So CMMC, to be clear, is 110 controls, but also you got DFARS requirements 7012 C through G, and we wanted some clarification from you that both would apply as to a contractor that handles CUI. So your thoughts on that?
So today, there is no expectation that we are going to sunset the 7012 clause. So you will see in your future requirements the 7012 clause that sets the boundary of the 800-171 and the incident reporting requirements. And then the CMMC clause will also be included in your contract that will require the validation of that compliance. I think if I'm understanding your question, you're also asking, will the assessors be looking at whether or not you have appropriately reported an incident? That is not intended to be as part of their requirements today. That's something that's handled by DC3 and will be handled elsewise. Now, what we have always said, though, is if a company is certified and they suffer an incident, that there will be a forensic look that will be done to determine whether or not the assessor who gave them their certification missed something or made a misstep, and that we need to change the training or make sure that that the integrity of the process is still good. Or if the company had been compliant and then became negligent, right? That could be also a possibility. Or if this incident was as a result of something that our model or our requirements don't cover, and that would be an additional thing to look at to ensure that we have a model that is current and is on top of the threats that we're seeing as they come.
Okay, so she said that DFARS 7012 will not be a routine part of the CMMC assessment.
Right.
But that's a little bit not, well, let's put it plainly, that's not the whole story. If people think that they can get away with not complying with DFARS, they have a whole nother thing coming.
Well, and DFARS 7012 specifically is the one that, especially C through G, but just 7012 in general is very much sort of that bone of contention with a lot of different people. And we've talked about it on here plenty of times that CMMC and DFARS 7012 are not the same thing. CMMC is not, CMMC has its own DFARS, right? So I mean, it's a completely different thing entirely. However, so I see what she's saying where they're not going to be assessed, right? Because CMMC is a different thing. So you assess on CMMC, okay, great. DFARS 7012 though, if you can't make sure that you are addressing that, that is something that's in just about every contract in the DoD. So, I mean, you're going to be in violation of your contract. So, whether or not somebody comes and knocks on your door and checks on it, and they are starting to do that kind of thing now, we have these sort of, randomized NIST check-ins, if you will, right? But it's also, what if you have an incident? And excuse me, it's not what if, it's when you have an incident.
Right.
Everybody is going to have some kind of security incident at some point. A phishing email is considered a security incident for most places. I don't know of anybody who is working out there right now in the DIB who hasn't had a phishing attempt at some point, right? I mean, that's going to happen. Well, what if that phishing attempt was really dramatic and it ended up getting, somebody clicked the wrong thing, which is very possible. When that happens, if you cannot attest to C through G and give the DoD the information they need, you're going to be in violation of DFARS 7012. And then that opens up a whole new can of problems, a whole new can of worms.
Right.
So, yeah. So exactly. It's not being assessed directly, but that does not mean that it goes by the wayside. You should definitely make sure that you are doing both of those things in tandem, because they're so pivotal to each other. They really are when you break it down. I mean, NIST 800-171 is the backbone of CMMC version 2 and is built into 7012. So you've got that sort of NIST kind of weaving through everything. So if you can get your CMMC ducks in a row and make sure that you just check off that C through G on 7012, you'll be golden. Yeah.
So DFARS might not be assessed, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be an important part of your continued ability to work with the DoD.
Exactly. And don't think for a second too, that if for some reason during your assessment, if like somebody from the DIBCAC notices something that makes it very clear you're not 7012 compliant, that they could, I mean, in theory, they could say something to someone about that if they wanted to. I mean, that's kind of part of their job. So you don't want to be in that situation either, where they have to start asking you questions about something that was not part of your assessment.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Lots of interesting stuff coming out in today's Compliance Corner. Why don't we try and do a second one if we can?
I like it.
Because I think there's a lot to unpack here, and I think people have a desire to learn a lot more about this. So until next time, I'm Orly saying bye-bye. Farewell, but not goodbye. I don't know. See you next time.